welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we're talking with Alex Olivant, Farm and Environmental Advisor with Agrii, and Dan Wood, Crop Input Specialist with RHIZA. With the introduction of a combined sustainable farming incentive and countryside stewardship mid-tier offering, we're going to take a look at what that could mean for farmers and growers and their businesses, as well as how precision farming and digital tools can help achieve the requirements of those schemes. So to start us off, well, how busy has it been this spring? I know with so many farmers asking about SFI options. Let's ask you, Alex, how important has SFI been for farmers this spring following that horrendous autumn?
Yeah, it's safe to say the phone has been fairly busy. Obviously, a lot of farmers unfortunately weren't able to get spring crops in quite as they'd hoped, or they had winter crops that had failed, which then gave them a bit more of a spring cropping opportunity. The weather's probably not helped at all, which has meant that the SFI has been able to fall into a place of offering a lower risk payment as such. So yeah, we've had an awful lot of applications of people trying to slot something in so they can get at least paid for something this year, and then looking at maybe reducing the area with the flexibility of the rotational options going forward.
And Dan, from your perspective at RHIZA, what have been the nature of inquiries this spring with regards to SFI?
Yeah, likewise with Alex, the phone hasn't stopped ringing, mainly in terms of soil sampling and the SAM1 option. People who haven't had samples on the farm for a little while, they've needed soil samples, they've needed organic matter results. So we've been out doing a lot more than we would usually at this time of year. The labs are now keeping up with the demand, luckily, which is looking better, as there was quite a wait for results a little while ago. They seem to have got their act together now and are meeting up the demand.
And Alex, how important have these SFI options been this spring?
They've been incredibly important. The whole change to agriculture over the last few years is really starting to kick in. So we've had the reduction of the BPS, which this year people are really going to start noticing. So having the SFI available as a risk-free, yes, you do have to put some work in to get some money out, which is different to the BPS, but on the whole, they are options and things that can fit into people's farming systems. So they are there to offer a risk-free / a lower risk income for areas which, if this wasn't an option, would have been fairly tricky to get planted up.
And Dan, I know you work predominantly in the southwest of England. For those farmers and growers that you have been talking to, how important have these SFI options been for them?
Yeah, really important. I mean, there's various different codes on there, various different options, which are more suited to the bigger fields that you see over in the east, but still there's a lot of people who have been putting different cover crop solutions in. So whether that's wild bird seed mix, flower mixtures on the margins, and taking out some of those poorer, smaller fields and putting them into options. And particularly, there's a lot of people down here who've got some more advanced kit on farm, GPS and the like, and the new precision farming options are really giving them a bit of help along the way of utilising that equipment they've invested in.
And so looking forward, Alex, perhaps you can take us through some of the changes that are happening with these schemes.
So SFI is now known as SFI 2024. So we've had 2022 and 2023, and on the 21st of May, they launched the finer detail of what they're calling their 2024 offering. So that is 102 actions within that, which sounds quite a big, scary amount. But actually, when you break it down, there's 22 existing actions from what were available in the SFI 2023. There are some rule tweaks and changes to those. So do just keep an eye out if you're going into a new scheme, assuming that they're the same. There are some changes. 57 of the options are pretty much carried over from countryside stewardship, so what have been available in mid-tier. And that leaves 23 new actions, effectively, which are the ones which are creating a bit of excitement and hopefully some new opportunities.
What do you actually mean by they're called actions?
So in the past, so with mid-tier, they were known as options. The government have decided this time that they're going to be described as actions. And where in the past they've had quite a lot of restrictions and management controls, certainly in the 2023 scheme, the SFI was a little bit more flexible, shall we say, and all actions had an aim. And as long as you met that aim, you were seen to be making the need for that action. This year they have, or for the SFI 2024, they have introduced some musts as well as the aim. So you must meet the aim and you must complete the musts, which are mostly focused on management, species, timings, etc.
And so where do we start in understanding the changes and what those changes mean for the farm business?
Well, first, I'd like to just touch on the changes of going through and to say that if you're in an SFI 2023 scheme already, you don't need to worry about these changes. That what you signed up for is what you continue to run on. But going forward into the SFI 2024 scheme, there's changes to the winter cover cropping, which is SAM2. So that now has to be between 2 cash crops and cannot be taken to harvest. That was a little bit of a grey area previously. There's some options which at the point of recording, these were the rules, and we're assuming they're not going to change before the scheme comes live, which is that there's no, some options cannot be rotational anymore. So unless they're already established. So where people this spring have found it really useful to be able to put in a legume fallow, so the num3 option, where they've been able to put that in going forward, that's going to have to stay in for the full 3 years of the agreement if you opt to put it in. So it's taking away that 1 year rotation option. It's gone. It's now static. So yeah, we're no longer able to pop that into our rotation to act as a break crop. So the 4 that's happened to is the num3 legume fallow, the SAM3 herbal lay, IPM2, which is the flower rich margins and plots, and the AHL1, which was the pollen and nectar. So they were ones which people were quite enjoying having them in as rotational options. Unfortunately, they have been pulled and made static now. And then the only other 2 kind of major changes is the IPM4, which is, insecticide. That is now based on a cropping year rather than an agreement year. So that's a change for the better. And then your winter bird food, it now must have flowers before the end of June in year 1. So where people might have been looking at drilling that after an early barley had come off, that now wouldn't meet the aim. So wouldn't meet your actions aim. So therefore you wouldn't be eligible for payment effectively. So if it's not got flowers by the end of June in year 1, you now have to keep that in place for 2 years. So that's, like I say, it's coming down to these musts that they've now introduced. It's just making sure there's a bit finer management on all of the options. So that's what's changed from the 2023 rules to 2024. But I mean, the 3 new ones that people are getting quite excited about, and I've certainly had a lot of conversations with farmers about, is the no-till option, which is going to be coded SOH1, the variable rate application of nutrients, which is PRF1, which stands for precision farming 1, and then the camera and remote sensor guided herbicide spraying, which is PRF2. So codes are going to keep us all guessing and keep us going while we learn all of those, but we're getting there.
And Dan, what are your thoughts on some of these specific actions that Alex was referring to there?
Yeah, so some of the actions are reasonably straightforward and don't vary much from what people might have been doing historically, albeit with a slight tweak. So the likes of SAM1, which has been keeping me quite busy, which is the soil sampling. That's your basic soil analysis, which most farmers do on a reasonable rotation anyway. But now you need to incorporate organic matter into that. So just reminding people of that. So we're avoiding potential costly mistakes by not doing it when we're doing normal sampling. And then with the num1 nutrient management plan, the majority of farmers are doing one of these, whether it's for Environment Agency or for Red Tractor or the like. So using the information we hold through cropping and soil analysis results to create their nutrient management plan for them. But the real bit where we add value is in the new PRF1, so Precision Farming 1, which is your variable rate application code. So there's a little bit of mist out there at the moment, just with some clarification of the action and what we need to do and how we make it work. Hopefully by the time this airs, there might be a bit more clarification over where we are, and the civil servants will be allowed to talk to us and clarify points. but the nuts and bolts of it is that the land that's included in the action needs to have been zoned according to some form of soil type and difference across the farm. So our soil scanning service sort of offers the ability to do that by zoning up fields based on soil texture and conductivity. And then once that's been done, doing the soil analysis, zoning across those fields, and then creating those application plans based on the crop need rather than just a whole field application based on the whole field analysis.
And so, Dan, how important is the role of precision farming technology in helping us achieve the requirements of these schemes?
Once the fields have actually been zoned up, the key thing is actually getting that actioned across the farm. So a lot of farms now have got technology that can cope with it, but it's just the actual plan to do that. Now, the key wording in the action is that it needs to be pre-programmed at variable applications. So you can't just manually up and down the sprayer or the fertilizer as you're going across the field, or speed up or slow down to vary the rate. It has to be a pre-programmed file put on the device in the tractor cab or the sprayer cab. So the Contour platform allows us to create those applications for PK, etc., or line, using the soil requirements, crop requirements based on soil analysis, or using satellite imagery for variable rate nitrogen.
And that all stems back to your nutrient planning, doesn't it?
Exactly. So once we know what the cropping is, once we know what the soil type is, what we know what the indices are, etc., we can then build that plan around the crop requirement rather than just a blanket rate.
Yeah, and Alex, this is exactly what this is driving at, isn't it? Is that's the action, and this is how we deliver on that, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the key thing with all of these actions or options or whatever we're deciding to call them, is that everything has to be evidenced. And if you've got a platform where you can record and keep track of everything as you go, then as and when and if then I think they've changed the term from inspection to friendly visit. So when we now get a friendly visit, and they say what's gone on in this field, you've got it recorded as, I don't know, no insecticide, SAM1, your nutrient management plan, IPM plan. You can just hit go, and if you're able to generate a report that you can give to them, it should make everybody's lives a little bit easier.
Sure. I mean, you were mentioning about the wildflower mixtures, that they've got to be flowering before a certain period. Well, Dan, you were talking about how Contour, you can save images to that. So, when you're on the farm, I guess the job to do is capture that image, link it onto that map, is evidenced, the loop is closed, isn't it? Oh, is that right?
No, exactly right. So within the app, you can drop pins, you can draw polygons around areas that you might be. Historically, it's been used for weed identification and for plant counts and noting infield objects that you might want an operator to know about. But with SFI coming around, the ability to drop a pin, drop a note where you are, whether you've dug a soil pit to look at something for your visual assessment of soils, or whether it's taking a picture of the drill going through, taking a picture of the label of the seed, and then any other reports you put together afterwards, adding that to that location as a PDF makes it easy to show that's the location that option took place, and knowing the information of that soil pit in future.
If we can just clarify a couple of the areas that growers and advisors can look to look at some of the more detail about some of these new changes. So soils, I know Dan's been talking about how he's helping farmers there with the RHIZA services. Alex, just could you give us a couple of the examples of what's new there?
Yeah, so the soils has now got like a soil health heading, and under there's 4 options. So there's one which is your no-till farming. So again, we're waiting for, or hoping there'll be a bit more clarification on exactly what machinery counts as no-till, as and when more rules may come out, hopefully. And then there are 3 new options coded SOH2 to SOH4, which are all based around different cover crops. So very similar to the winter cover cropping one that we had already, which is known as SAM2. So yeah, there's 3 more ones which vary on when it's drilled. So there's a spring and summer cover, and then a winter cover that follows maize as well, that are also available under the soils.
Sure. And just to remind me, Dan, that's where you're really helping farmers with the RHIZA services and Contour with that soil testing, sampling, and then the recording of that data on Contour.
Yeah, so as I mentioned within RHIZA, it's putting together everything so we can map and document the variations across the field, whether that's in soil texture and soil type, or whether that's the actual indices of the field for main nutrients, PK, Mg, pH, and also the organic matter part of it as well, and putting that together into one nice tidy place.
To find out how SFI can work for your business, speak to your local environmental advisor or RHIZA crop input specialist. You can find their contact details on the Agrii website, agrii.co.uk/contact. Alex, I know we're generally focusing on crops here, but for the moorland farmer rearing livestock, there's some changes there, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few new options and things that become available there. So yeah, definitely worth having a look at the booklet or having a chat to anybody in Team Agrii who might be able to point you in the right direction of where you need to be. The government website actually does have quite a useful funding for farmers tool that you can type in upland or type in a rough code and it'll ping up all the options that are that you'd be eligible to apply for.
Well, that's really good. And would the same speak for agroforestry as well?
Yeah, again, everything there. There's two options for the agroforestry based on low density and very low density, and it can be used on arable and grassland. So if that's something that you're interested in, again, all more details hopefully will be launched into a nice whizzy handbook that we should get when the scheme officially comes live.
And Dan's mentioned precision farming a few times. What do farmers need to do to meet those requirements?
So under the precision farming banner, there are four options which are attracting quite a lot of interest, and they're the variable rate application of nutrients, which is what we've been talking about quite a lot today. So that's for what it says on the tin, really, the variable rate application of your nutrients. But there are a few bits that we're hoping to get clarified in there. That they just within the options at the minute, it says something about all nutrients, and we're just wanting to break that down a bit more. Because obviously that could affect whether we include land that where we're putting farmyard manure or whether we don't include land, because it is a rotational option. You've then got your camera remote sensor guided herbicide spraying. I think Dan touched on this earlier, actually. We're now seeing quite a lot of people investing in this new machinery to then be able to claim the option on farm and also to offer it as a contracting option as well. So certainly in my neck of the woods, I'm Lincolnshire based, there's quite a few contractors who are actually buying this machinery to be then able to offer another service for them as well, which is wasn't quite where I saw the SFI scheme going, but it's really generating a lot more work. Then the other two within the precision farming are the non-mechanical and mechanical robotic weeding. And again, that's the same sort of thing. People are investing in the machinery, certainly over a decent size acreage. The payment there gets it worthwhile buying the machinery. So yeah, there's a slight change. You could safely say there's a bit of a shift within the SFI to reduce inputs. A lot of people kind of brand it as saying, well, they're trying to make us all go regen. And I don't think that's the case at all. I very much think that it's a way of the government just wanting farmers to be a bit more aware as to what they're throwing on, what's in the ground already, and just getting a bit more of a picture as to how things could be done slightly differently, but to achieve the same outcomes.
And Dan, just coming back to what you were talking about in terms of working with farmers and the precision farming, we've talked about variable rate application and nutrient plans in previous podcasts. So is this more of the same, or are we becoming even more intricate in terms of the ask of SFI?
I don't think we're becoming more intricate in terms of what the SFI is asking us to do. It's asking us to apply our nutrients in a more effective manner and put the right amount of product in the right place, which is the overall goal of what we're trying to do with precision farming. I think it's important to note, though, that historically a lot of the precision farming conversation has been around arable cropping. And one thing that's coming more and more to light lately, and this will certainly help us with our grassland growing past the industry, where they're actually looking about how they can get more from their grassland, how they can grow a better crop, a more even crop. I'm doing a few interesting things at the moment with grassland growers who are looking to use satellite imagery for their nitrogen applications to top up and put the right amount. And so that combined with a bit of variable rate P and K as well would put them in a prime plot for the SFI action. And then when you tie that in with the mechanical weeding of the maize crops for those dairy farms and people growing a vast acreage of maize, there's more interest in there on the precision side.
And Dan, I guess that these precision farming techniques aren't just helping us meet the requirements of the SFI schemes, but is also helping improve our farm business in terms of its performance.
Yes, I mean, the myth with precision farming when I first started in it was we're going to save you a fortune in your fertilizer. And it was going to be the golden bullet to cut all fertilizer inputs. Well, in reality, a lot of the application plans I do at the moment are similar, but putting it in the right place, which, although not improving our fertilizer spend, will actually be helping with our crop yield and actually getting the right amount of crop. And there are places where it does massively improve the fertilizer spend, where we're lowering the rate of nitrogen applications in poor areas where we know from looking at yield maps against satellite imagery, against the soil type, etc. We know that part of the field is at its maximum. Putting a load more fertilizer on is not going to make a better crop. So there are savings to be made with it as well.
And Alex, it's interesting to hear how the use of technology is really important in terms of making the best use of these SFI options. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for years, the RPA have been giving out the FETF, Farming Equipment and Technology Fund payments, or not payments, grants for equipment. And now that's really now tying in with the SFI. So some of the stuff that has been grant funded in the past is now things that you can get paid for using it for. So if you've been fortunate enough to be able to already invest in the equipment and now you can get paid for it doing it again, it really does full circle. And if that then ends up benefiting your business, ultimately, I don't see why you wouldn't be giving it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple more just wanted to cover. Boundaries. Tell us a bit about that. The stone walls and how that can help a farmer.
Yeah, so there's now going to be payments for stone walls. I think there's a new one coming in for ditches and dikes as well. So I think that is very similar to what we had seen with HLS many, many moons ago. And then obviously there's all the hedgerow options as well. So again, it's another shift towards something else. They're trying to help you improve how your farm is maintained and managed, which is stuff that on the whole you'd be doing anyway. So it's nice that there's now a bit of funding available to be able to support that.
And not forgetting that this is public money for public good. That's the government strapline surrounding and overlaying all of this, isn't it?
Absolutely. So a lot of the options, when you really look down and actually start to think about it, are they're working towards water quality or air quality. There is a bit of a push that they have spoken about potentially bringing educational access into the SFI. It's not something that it has been launched just yet. We were expecting more information out of that in June. We've not had it yet. So it's all about introducing people into letting people learn a bit more about what's going on farm as well, which has probably been a gap that's been missing for a little while.
Let's just think about in the sort of this latter part of the podcast about how and what advice you would give to growers to really take advantage of SFI that's clearly been so important this spring, but also to help understand the changes. So we've covered some of those details. Dan, for you, in terms of taking those calls as you are right now and being so busy, what is your advice to farmers in terms of where to start, how to build on what they've already been doing?
I think the first thing and the key message is to look at your sort of 3-4 year plan, any that you've got in place already, roughly where you're cropping and what you're doing, and then pick the options that work around what you're already doing. You always see people who go chasing after the highest paying option or action rather, sorry, where that can then have implications further on down the line. Picking those rotational options. The key thing with the precision farming one that we've mentioned, the variable rate application, is that it is rotational. So you can move it around and follow a rotation. The same one is with soil sampling. If you're not already in an SFI and you're looking to go into it, if you're having any soil sampling done, just get it with an organic matter on it, and then you're just future proofing yourself rather than having that expense of going out again in a year's time and collecting another bit of soil from that same field that you did 12 months ago. So those are the two key things I'd say.
And for those farmers that are listening, thinking, well, this could cost me money to gear up and be in the right place, does it have to be expensive to take, particularly if we're thinking about your world, precision farming, to really start to take that next step?
It can be, as with anything in life, you can go a simple option, cheap and cheerful, or you can have all the bells and whistles, associated costs. I mean, from my previous life working in precision technology in the machinery market, I know there's an awful lot of equipment out there which is capable of doing it, capable of doing the precision farming tasks, but the farmer, for whatever reason, isn't using it for that, whether it's a tractor that's got auto steer, but they haven't got a fertilizer spinner capable of variable rate, or they might have a fertilizer spinner that's capable of doing it, but they bought it for an alternative reason, such as the section control and not overlapping and double spreading. So a lot of people have, if not all of the kit, half the kit to do the job already. So sometimes it can be as simple as an unlock or a bit of education on how to do something with existing equipment.
In terms of helping farmers, simplify this world of having to record everything on the farms to be able to have that evidence. You've talked about Contour a few times. How does that help the farmer?
Well, so it's documentation is the key word. They've got all their soil information, all their organic matter testing, zonal testing, everything like that, all in one place. And from the variable rate applications that we're doing, and creating nutrient management plans, nutrient plans, all their nutrient data is there, so we can easily run off those reports, tied in with the app and noting those locations and evidencing everything that you're doing. So whether it's as we said, digging a soil pit, drilling a flower margin, noting the day it was done, that it's flowered by a certain date, any of those evidences can be recorded.
How does a farmer start to work their way through understanding the detail? And some of the detail has changed, which is really quite significant. Where's the best place to go to seek that understanding?
Well, I always start with the search engine, shall we say. I always use that, type in SFI 2024 and see what pops up. But the best place is obviously to go to a government website. Like I say, I think it's called the Funding for Farmers or something along those lines. And it literally, you can type in any option. It has everything listed on there. At the minute, each option has its own page, which you can get lost down a little bit of a rabbit warren trying to find out what you need. But we're hoping that, like the old scheme, it did end up in a publication booklet that was renewed online every now and again. So we're hoping that we get a similar thing for the 2024 scheme.
And of course, what I'm hearing is that these actions are very specific to each farm business. So I guess that on-farm advice is really important here, Alex, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything, there's not a one size fits all at all. So I always kind of start by going in on farm saying that you've clearly got some bits, every farm does, some bits that you don't want to farm, whether they're a soggy field corner or whether it's somewhere that is just awkward to get to, the field's not big enough to get your machinery in, the gateways aren't big enough to get machinery in, whatever. So let's reduce that risk, let's reduce the time, let's increase your efficiency, take out the bad bits, put it into a risk-free or relatively risk-free option with the SFI, something that works in that particular area. At the end of the day, and again, something Dan hinted at, you've got to make the scheme work for you and you not work for the scheme.
Thank you, Alex and Dan, for sharing your insights and current understanding of the SFI scheme. Please note that the details discussed in this podcast may be subject to change. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer-term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. If you have any questions that you'd like us to ask the experts, email info@agrii.co.uk. See you next time.